our problem to see about what's going into the States. We're concerned about what's coming into Canada.
And the smugglers that might be helping people come into Canada.
And that's the main thing that we're worried about. Our members have met hundreds of people who have crossed coming into Canada. These people are looking for safety, not confrontation. We're not at all afraid of these people. We're not afraid of them. We're afraid for them with the conditions that are now along the border.
Dave, you used the word tsunami earlier. Why did you use that word to talk about what you were anticipating or concerned about in the future?
Well, in 2017, there was an awful lot of people crossing, and again, there's going to be some desperation. The deportation plans that are going on is very strong, and the United States feels they have a problem. They had an election, and that's what they voted for. So it looks like there's going to be the will to do deportation. That's what. So we anticipate numbers for sure. And I think this will happen. We've already seen a little bit of it. And
your sense is if Donald Trump moves on that plan to deport upwards of 11 million undocumented people, some of those people will try to figure out how to get into Canada.
Well, I think so for sure. Typically, we've been more welcoming. So I mean that may be what happens. I think for us, a little bit the worry is that the first phase is supposed to take in people with criminal records and gang affiliations, things like that. So if they're going to be the ones coming to crossing, in the area of our community, I mean that's definitely disconcerting, and it's you worry for public safety, you worry for the safety of our emergency services and our safety. It's an unknown, and we're not sure how a migrant may react that is in that situation, that is potentially part of a criminal element. So
what should we do about it? As a nation, what should we do about that?
Well, I think we just have to. I think we have to be really strong in this.
What does that mean? Be really strong in that?
Well, I think the messaging has to be that you can't just come across the border. I mean, it's besides being dangerous to a migrant themselves crossing. You can potentially die. It's just we don't have the resources to absorb this what could potentially be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. We already have a housing crisis. We have our medical system's overburdened. Like the other night when we had a call, there were 6 crossers and there's 3 ambulances on site, and that's pretty much the entirety of the ambulances in our area, as well as having our medical first responders there and our CMP. So those resources are all in one spot for one issue. Well, what happens to the rest of the community if there's something happening? So it's things like that. I just know that I don't believe we can absorb such a number of people. Again, you want to be compassionate and do what's right, but I think we also have to make sure that whoever's crossing is fully vetted, and I think they need to be returned to where they're coming from.
Denis, do you worry about that as well? I want to go to Jody in a moment, but do you worry about that, Denis? We've spoken with people, and this was at the height of the Roxham Road issue, people who are working in Montreal, for example, with folks who are seeking asylum, and their services were overwhelmed because of the number of people who are coming across. Do you worry that could happen again if that deportation plan in the United States goes forward?
Yes, but I think the way to address the problem is we have an immediate problem. Yes, of course, we have to do something about it. But the problem will not go away by pouring $1 billion or 2 or 3 into military operations along the border. What we have to do, as the president of Mexico said, Claudia Sheinbaum said to Trump in her phone call, it's not by closing borders, but by bridging between governments and between people that we will help things. When you have embargoes and sanctions and whatever that hurt southern countries and impact on their citizens, it just fuels that kind of mass migration, and it will not stop. Now we can try to stop it here by doing things like drones or whatever. That's like if you have a bathtub that's overflowing, you throwing towels on the floor to sponge the water out. but that won't help if you don't close the tap. What we have to do is do something to help people in their own country to make it a safe and pleasant place to live, and not a place where you're fearful and you're extremely poor and so on. And then on the long term, yes, unfortunately, it won't stop the problem that we have now, but on the long term, it's going to do something, and it's going to cost much less than militarizing our border.
Jody Stone, you're right there. And so one of the things we found when we went down to the southern border with the United States and Mexico is the closer you get to the border, the more complicated and nuanced this issue is. People have all sorts of opinions from a distance, but you're right there. How do you see this and the possibility that whatever happens in the United States will impact your own community and how you relate with that border?
I'm really not sure what your question.
What are you most worried about? Are you worried about that? I mean, Dave talked about a tsunami. Are you worried about that impacting your own community?
Well, everything's a worry, right? The uncertainty of a president that is willing to completely change the dynamics between our two countries is scary. I think the embargo is something that's being talked about a lot by everybody in the community. And I'm sure it's being talked about in our community on the other side. So yeah, it's the uncertainty, I believe, that's scaring people, and the fact that President Trump, President-elect, is willing to say just about anything to please his followers is scary as well.
The border is a physical line, but it's also something we're saying that kind of lives in people's minds as well in terms of how we think about our relationship with the United States. If that were to change, if the border were to be strengthened, how do you think your relationship, Jody, with the border would be different?
It depends, because it's almost impossible to make it. You can't build a wall in sense that you can't do it. It's just the communities are so intertwined that it's impossible. It's just we definitely need to keep the communications between our two countries open. Policies at the federal level for maybe aerial tourism might need to be adjusted, or because our borders, there's no other way into Canada than air. So that's the area we need to look into, changing some of our policies.
Dave, what about for you? I mean, what would change in terms of how you think about the border if it were to be strengthened?
Well, I guess you'd see drones around, potentially, and more resources, patrolling, things like that. I mean, it's pretty open here. It always has been. It is going to be sad once you see things get so much more tight between us, because you just remember the way things were. But if there's drugs and guns and different things across the border, I see that if we're patrolling, say CBSA, which they've discussed as potential patrolling between the ports, I think it's a good idea. Just because there's things that, like, who wants anyone smuggling? Who wants anyone, potentially coming into your remote farmyard? And, potentially they're criminal. Like, I mean, hey, there's good people too, but you just never know. If you're willing to cross a border legally, you just never know. So I think if we're doing our part on our side, hopefully, Trump will say, okay, you're doing what you need to be doing, and the tariffs won't happen and things like that. But I mean, I'm guessing this is to change our behavior. So I assume they have stats they're looking at that what happens from the north. I know we've seen a few stats. Kind of surprised me. I thought things were coming this way, but I guess things go both ways. So
you think that change is inevitable, though?
Yeah, the change is inevitable. I don't think there's any way around it. So I think we just have to kind of go with it and try to take the positives you can out of it. If there's less drug trafficking and guns and human trafficking, then I think it's a better situation.
Denny, what about just finally for you? I mean, again, the border is a thing, a physical thing, but it's also a symbol for many Canadians, and that symbol speaks to the relationship between these two countries. Do you think that symbol is going to be threatened by what we're talking about?
Very much so. It used to be, as the other people said, it used to be a fairly easy crossing. People would share services and so on. I'd like to say that there are, in fact, no reports of any assaults by migrants along the border, at least in this area that I know of. I'm a bit worried to see politicians already sort of competing to show who's the toughest of Trump. You know, they're saying basically, if we make it tough enough for them to come here, they won't come. I would say instead, if we make it easy enough for them to have a good, decent living in their own country, well, then they won't come. They'll live safely and decently. There are already helicopters flying over regularly. There are, of course, RCEP cars along the border constantly. If that's the kind of border we're going to get, it's not going to be pleasant at all to live along the border.
It sounds like it's already happening.
Yeah, it's starting very much so. Yeah.
It's great to speak with all three of you about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Denis Bouchard lives in Hemingford, Quebec. It's on the border with New York, right at Roxham Road. He works at Bridges Not Borders to support migrants who are crossing that border. Dave Carlson is the reeve for the municipality of Emerson Franklin in Manitoba, on the border with Minnesota and North Dakota, also a volunteer firefighter in his community. And Jody Stone is the mayor of Stansted, Quebec, on the border with Vermont. If you live in a border community in Canada, we would love to hear from you. How have you seen that border change over time? All three of our guests talked about what the border used to be like in terms of ease of crossing and how that has evolved over time. But also what changes to the Canada-U.S. border would you like to see, and what would those changes, if it's strengthened, what would they actually mean to you in terms of your ease of passage back and forth from Canada into the United States? Email us and let us know what it's like to live on the border, and perhaps what you see that other people don't see. You can email us at current@cbc.ca. Your regional update is coming up, and then
You should know that winter comes in Saskatchewan. Why would you rush around with bald tires today?
Even though I have winter tires, I never know about the guy behind me or the guy coming through the intersection, right?
it is not a season for bald tires. Driving in winter can be tricky, especially if you or the cars around you are slipping and sliding all over the place. The question is mandating winter tires, as they do in Quebec, the answer to create safer streets? We'll talk about that coming up. We're back in 90 seconds. I'm Matt Galloway. This is The Current. Stick around.
It's 9:30. I'm Angelica Montgomery with your news and weather from Quebec. The City of Montreal employee is recovering from shock after shots were fired during a towing operation. It happened last night as cars were being towed on the street to be cleared of snow. Police say at least one gunshot was fired and a 39-year-old man has been arrested. Some small businesses in Quebec that do not normally use Canada Post say they are struggling with delivery problems. Private couriers are getting swamped by all the extra business caused by the Canada Post strike. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business estimates that companies have lost $1 billion since the start of the strike. 16 public daycare centers, or CPEs, are on strike this morning in various parts of Quebec. Today is the second out of 3 Wednesdays where strikes are planned. They involve more than a dozen establishments in municipalities, including Quebec City, Montreal, Gatineau, and Roxton Falls in the eastern townships. Taking a look at the weather now, there is a rainfall warning in effect for multiple parts of the province, including Montreal, the townships, Quebec City, all the way over to the Gaspé and the North Shore. Watch out for freezing rain as well in Baie-Saint-Paul and Blanc-Sablon. Heavy winds are also hitting parts of the Gaspé, North Shore, and the Magdalen Islands. 5 today in Montreal, 0 tonight in Quebec City, 8 today.
Hello again. I'm Matt Galloway. You're listening to The Current.
I can remember Sean fondly now for the parts of him that I loved and admired. I don't feel, triggered by the things that used to be upsetting for me. And so I feel like we're on good terms. If we meet